race to explore space, the final frontier, used to be a battle between rich countries. Only they had the pockets deep enough to pay. But all that is changing. Now the battle is between private firms. And in the last few years, a new breed of space disruptors has emerged. New technologies like miniature satellites and renewable rockets, plus more commercial investment, put space within reach for much smaller organizations. Exploring space used to be dominated by the rivalry between Russia and America, especially during the Cold War. But a quiet revolution is taking place. It all began on October the 4th, 1957. The USSR launches the world's first satellite, Sputnik 1. It's the first step in what will become a race with the USA to put a man on the moon. April 6, 1965 is the launch of Intelsat 1, the first commercial communications satellite linking Europe and North America. Space is no longer just for wealthy governments. 2017 saw the launch of around 380 satellites, and private commercial rocket firms are now vying for the business. There's even startups competing to build a new generation of space rovers to explore the moon. Today, the space industry is reckoned to be worth more than $300 billion, and there are more players. About 70 countries have a stake in space, including Estonia and New Zealand. The cost of all this has rocketed down. To launch a traditional satellite could cost about $62 million. To launch one of the newer, smaller satellites, the price could be a mere $295,000. With so many satellites, we're capturing lots of new data and learning more than ever about our planet. One company pioneering new ways of exploring space is PLANETLABS, based in New Zealand. The rockets they're developing could hold the key to keeping down the huge cost of getting into space.
Really, the idea came to me very early on in my career, and it was really obvious that space needed a major change.
PLANETLABS' innovative approach could seriously disrupt the space sector. The rockets they are building to carry satellites into space are really low cost.
Generally, it's countries, not companies, going to space, and they go to space at such an infrequent rate and at such an exorbitant cost. The kind of access and frequency to space that we're proposing to create is never ever been created before.
The cost is just $5 million a time, a fraction of the current price. Eventually, the company hopes to launch 50 rockets a year, almost one a week.
Companies are coming up with incredibly new and innovative and disruptive ideas to use space. The large school bus sized satellites are being replaced with the small microwave sized satellites. I think there was about $1 billion alone last year of venture capital money that went into small space startups. So it's really an exploding industry, and the small satellite industry is the fastest growth area in space, and they all require launch.
It's taken the company 4 years to develop its own rocket, the Electron. 17 meters long and 1.2 meters in diameter, each rocket is made from strong, lightweight carbon composite material and can carry a payload of 225 kilograms. One of the most radical innovations is to use 3D printing to make the rocket engines. So they can build one in just 24 hours. Usually, a rocket engine takes months to make. Electric turbos are also used to pump fuel into the engine.
We print the entire rocket engine, all the turbo pumps, all the thrust chambers and the injectors. So we really adopted the technology when people were printing bottle openers and cats' prosthetics. We really kind of we're pioneers in the use of the technology for such high-end components.
On a remote eastern corner of New Zealand's North Island, Peter Beck's firm has the first privately owned launch site for rockets in the world. The Electron's first test was in May 2017. It managed to reach space, though it didn't quite reach its target orbit. But on the next test in January 2018, they succeeded.
Really the focus for the company right now is to get through these test flights and start flying our commercial customers as quickly as we can.
One company keen to make the most of the Electron is a satellite firm based in San Francisco called PLANETLABS. They design and build their own miniature satellites, each weighing just 4 kilograms. PLANETLABS satellites fly in much lower orbits than traditional satellites, just 300 miles above the Earth's surface. Usually satellites orbit the planet much higher, at around 22,000 miles up. This makes PLANETLABS satellites much cheaper because they can use smaller cameras but still capture high-resolution images. Baikonur is the biggest space launch facility in the world.
The launch should take place in about 45 minutes. This is the closest I've ever been to a launch pad. Here we're about shy of 2 kilometers, about 1.5 kilometers from the rocket.
PLANETLABS is another company doing a lot to disrupt the space industry. They make small, low-cost satellites called doves. Each is about the size of a shoebox, and inside they carry a high-powered telescope and camera. The company is sending dozens of Dove satellites into space. The PLANETLABS team watches the launch of one of their rockets.
All right, 50 seconds now.
We thought that we could do space a little bit differently, a little bit more low cost and agile.
It's an ambitious company. PLANETLABS was founded in 2010 by ex-NASA scientists. The first Dove satellites were launched in orbit just 3 years later. By 2015, it had put up 100 satellites. Now it plans to image the entire world.
NASA is focused very much on science and exploration, but we wanted to focus on these commercial and humanitarian applications.
They now have more than 200 satellites orbiting the Earth, more than any other company. As the Earth rotates, they are constantly taking images. Every day they can build up an ever more detailed snapshot of the whole surface of the planet. The firm monitors changes to the environment and economic activity, whether it's tracking deforestation or simply counting the shipments in and out of ports.
The main customers we have right now are in global agriculture. So large agricultural companies trying to provide insights to farmers to basically make them more productive. We also work a lot with governments. Governments care a lot about defense and intelligence and what's going on around their borders. We've recently started opening up some new types of customers, including finance, insurance, and energy.
We have completely taken the supply constraints off, and brought the cost of the pictures that we're taking down. So it's not just the governments and the big companies that can buy our data, but now the small and little companies.
In 2017, PLANETLABS put almost 140 satellites into space. Each day they photograph every point on the planet, so even more images and information are available. Almost 50 years ago, the original space race was to land a man on the moon. Exploring the moon again is one of the latest space challenges, but this time the plan is to go there with a new generation of lunar rovers.
There's a foot coming down the steps.
In 1969, Neil Armstrong becomes the first man to step onto the moon.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In the 1970s, the lunar rovers start exploring the surface.
Man, you are really bouncing.
Now private companies look again at the moon and wonder if they can get there as well.
What was unique about us is that we had no background going into this mission. It's good that we didn't have a background, because if we were from the industry, we would never undertake a challenge this big.
Rahul Narayan is head of Team Indus, the Indian startup which took part in a competition to get to the moon and sent back the latest images. Team Indus is another of the space disruptors.
The first thing I did after we got selected and registered was to go onto Google and type in and say, how do you land on the moon?
The Google Lunar X Prize was going to award $20 million to the first privately funded team that landed a spacecraft on the moon, sent a lunar rover across its surface, and transmitted high-definition images and video back to Earth. There were dozens of entries, and Team Indus was one of the most promising.
This is probably going to be the first time that a private space exploration mission would be undertaken of this magnitude.
Meet Ika, the rover that will travel aboard the Team Indus spacecraft to the moon. 3, 2, 1, 0.
In the end, the prize went unclaimed, but Team Indus is still working on its spacecraft and hopes to attempt a moon landing in 2019.
The main objective of the rover is to explore the lunar surface. So once the spacecraft lands, it is going to deploy the rover onto the surface. Its function is to traverse the surface, take photographs, take videos, collect engineering data, and then send it back home.
This rover has to be lightweight, so Team Indus has built a micro model weighing only 6.5 kilograms. It has 3 cameras, a top speed of 10 centimeters a second, and separate motors to power its 4 wheels. It's been designed specially to cope with moon dust and other lunar obstacles.
We've focused a lot of our energies on evolving the rover. We've figured out the best combination or configuration of electronics, of mechanics, of communication that would make this the most efficient package. This is the lightest rover that has ever flown to any other planetary body, so to say.
From a handful of friends who began the whole thing, Team Indus now has 120 staff. There's a wide range of skills and expertise, from young engineers to former government scientists. The Star Wars theme suggests Team Indus has a good sense of humour.
Need is the mother of invention. There was a need for us to be able to build certain technologies, certain systems, certain assemblies, because we just simply didn't have access to that technology. So that's what forced us to be innovative. Team Indus is disruptive in the way that we do things. The target itself was disruptive, which is to try and land something on the moon and to do it entirely out of India. And as a byproduct, what we do is economically more viable.
Even though the deadline of launching by March 2018 was ultimately unrealistic, the Google Lunar X Prize created hundreds of jobs at new space firms around the world, and it's raised $300 million through private sponsorship.
4, 3, 2.
But in February 2018, the Space Disruptors had a major triumph. That's when Heavy Falcon, a rocket designed by American entrepreneur Elon Musk, successfully took off from the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral, Florida. The huge rocket is capable of carrying 64 tons, the equivalent of putting 5 London double-decker buses into space. But instead of buses, the payload on this mission was much smaller and more symbolic. It was Elon Musk's old cherry red Tesla sports car, complete with a spacesuited mannequin listening to David Bowie on a loop. It's now the fastest car in the universe, travelling at around 25,000 miles an hour. Musk later admitted before the launch he had been a bit nervous.
I had this image of just a giant explosion on the pad with, that wheel bouncing down the road, and like the Tesla logo landing somewhere with a thud.
But it's the low cost of this mission which is the most significant. 2 of the 3 rocket boosters successfully landed back on Earth, so they can be used again. Heavy lift rockets like the Falcon will make it easier to put large military and intelligence satellites, bigger and more capable rockets, and huge telescopes to probe more distant corners of the universe into space.